And we're live. Hello and welcome to a special Thanksgiving edition of Maddie Allen Live. I wanted to go live for the first time in a little while because there's going to be some events coming up in the crypto community that I'll be hosting. And yeah, I just wanted to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving. I don't think that I've missed streaming on a Thanksgiving for the past 5 or 6 years. So even though I'm not doing the weekly stream anymore, figured I would come on and drop some alpha. So whether you're watching live or on replay, hit the like and subscribe button, share this out. Let me know if you can hear me all right, because I've got a different microphone than usual. But yeah, season's greetings. It's been a while. We've got some catching up to do. Let's see. So overall, there's been there's just so much to cover. But what I think I'll cover in this stream is definitely having to do with the ProveX sacrifice, which is the latest project by Richard Hart, and how that is impacting the game theory of the other tokens that he's created. Because I've been watching very closely, even if you haven't seen me on YouTube in a while. I've been studying everything that's been going on. There's a lot to unpack here. So just to get out of the way, happy Thanksgiving to everybody. I hope you're having a great time. I hope you're spending time with family and loved ones and taking good care of yourself. I am thankful for being a part of a culture in crypto that doesn't quit and is here for the right reasons, of being long-term minded with hex staking, being a bit counterculture when it comes to crypto, and being in PulseChain, which is a better fork of Ethereum. PulseX is definitely something I would remind you is probably worth a lot more than people are assigning the value to it now, because Uniswap is so valuable, and because that's one of the most important inventions in the history of crypto, is a decentralized exchange. So that's pretty cool. And just this whole idea of we're here because central banking has led the world down the wrong path. And so let's say somebody's into Charles Hoskinson coin, or somebody's into Vitalik coin or Satoshi coin or Richard Hart coins, whatever it is. While we can all have our battles, at the end of the day, I'm thankful that there are so many people in the world who are waking up to the idea that money printing is no good, it's corrupt, and there is a better system of transparency. There is a better system of being censorship resistant and sovereign. And, there's a price that you pay in terms of, in the short term, prices don't always do what you think they're going to do. And certainly, in the first cycle of anything where you're participating, usually you can expect to get wrecked, like I did when I was buying the top of Bitcoin at 20K, and then it fell all the way to below $4,000. So there is much crying about the hex and PulseChain and PulseX prices, but I would challenge everybody to think more deeply about the game theory of why that is. We'll cover that. I was a huge proponent of sacrificing for PulseChain and PulseX, and I still think at the time, we had seen hex do 10,000x. Maybe getting a 10,000x on those other assets wasn't the most rational thing that could have happened. But I absolutely do believe that, PulseChain and PulseX were both worth more than $1 billion. And probably part of, what threw a wrench into that was because of the SEC gatekeeping. And so, yeah, I'm gonna, I guess, drop some like truth bombs of like kind of how I see things having happened and how I would see things going forward, because I think it's really valuable to be able to call these things out and to have like, a strong corporate memory, if you will, is a term that Buck used recently in one of his spaces. We want to be able to dissect, how is this Richard Hart sacrifice different than the other Richard Hart sacrifices? Because while the definition of insanity is like doing the same thing and expecting different results, what if this is doing something different and expecting different results? Well, that might be a little bit more sane. I'm not going to claim that anything in the crypto space is like wildly sane, but that's part of what attracts the innovators and the disruptors, and again, the price you pay for being early to something is sometimes being wrong. But yeah, so I mean, so I think people have pointed out accurately that like, PulseChain and PulseX, those sacrifices were oversubscribed. And it wasn't just that there were 120,000 people participating or that many addresses. I mean, it wasn't just that there was $600 million brought in for PulseChain sacrifice and then $1 billion of PulseX. And by the way, as we dissect this, I would point out that like even really good PhD level AIs are like pretty bad at like figuring out what all the details were of the previous sacrifices, because there was so much game theory proposed by Richard and others. There was so much, so many lies in the SEC documents where they didn't even bother to fact check anything on like an actual blockchain where you could obviously see certain things. And so when I use Grok 4.1 on expert mode, that's typically like blowing my mind with being able to reason and study 100 websites all in a few seconds or a couple minutes, like it's still repeatedly getting these things wrong that will cover over like the previous sacrifice and how the sacrifice is different. And I think that creates some edge, and I think that's kind of interesting that very few people have any idea why things haven't been clicking for PulseChain and PulseX like they did for Hex, and like I suspect they may for ProveX. And even that comes with the caveat that we know very little about ProveX. But at the end of the day, I think one of the reasons why I'm so interested in it is I see a potential for price appreciation, which I'll, explain my thesis on. Of course, there's lots of caveats with like it being a sacrifice, so you can't expect anything, so on and so forth. But like, all other things being equal and not making any promises or having any expectations, I just think the takeaway is this is a very misunderstood space with a very brilliant founder who has had to make difficult trade-offs. For example, in order for Hex to like, maintain the price that it got to and all that good kind of stuff, in order to have the great run that it had, people sacrificing was a really great way to take supply off the market. And so when everybody had this like, image of how much their Hex was worth, the number on the screen wasn't really telling them the truth, because you couldn't have seen 600 billion or 1.6 billion dollars worth of hex, or any similar order of magnitude. Hundreds of millions could not have been sold onto the chart all at once without bringing the price down to about where we are now, like a penny or sub 1 penny. And so people had, bought hex and then saw it appreciate 10x or 50x, and then they were using that number in their head that was illiquid, in order to like expect, like, well, it's going to be that, it's going to be multiples of that, that they're getting back in Pulse and PulseX. And funny enough, people often misremember this or overlook it, but just about everybody had a chance to sell their Pulse and PulseX, well, Pulse in particular, at a 2.5x during the first 3 days of launch. Furthermore, if you had a whale multiplier, you damn near got a 10x. This wasn't just, a few seconds tick up on the chart. This was like a day or multiple days, maybe 3 days, where you could have sold it at a great profit. And so even the idea that like PulseChain and PulseX are like excessively wrecked, I think is a shallow and poor analysis, because it was made up of a group of such strong believers, or people who were so greedy, or both. They didn't want to sell, not everybody wanted to sell at a 2.5x. Like, that wasn't good enough. And so that led a lot of people to end up selling much lower. And now we're, maybe 80 or 90% off the SAC rate, between those two different coins. And that's an incredible opportunity for the next person who believes in these things. But right now, a lot of people are saying, well, like, how many things can Richard shill all at once? And like, there's plenty of FUD, and that's probably priced into the market to a certain extent. But my belief at this point is, we're in a really interesting situation where, Pulse and PulseX, like, they don't have a whole lot of new buy pressure. There are positive things, that can happen in the future, but in the extremely short term, over the next like week, I would probably expect the Hex and Pulse and PulseX to go down as a function of how much Richard hypes ProveX. And at this point, he hasn't done it that much, very little. And I think that is creating conditions to where we will have an extremely undersubscribed sacrifice, where right now there's $5 million that people put in for ProveX.info. And, this is like maybe a ZK P2P type of on and off ramp, peer-to-peer exchange type of thing, somewhat using ZK proofs. We don't know if it's built yet or not. We don't know if sacrifices will get anything. We don't know so many things. We don't know when it will be released. We don't even know what chain it'll be on. I think it'll be on PulseChain. We've just had Richard hinting at this is something that could be helpful to PulseChain. And that's about it. Like, we might have seen a website pop up for a little bit, vitals.cash, that like I tweeted about, either from @MattyAllen or @PulseChain, which is the PulseChain conference account. And so you can go see like the information that was released there before the website was taken down, because maybe it was just a tease, or maybe it was like an intentional or unintentional leak of like hints. But the fact that Richard did not accept Hex, PulseChain, PulseX for these has made the game theory very tight, where there is little liquidity right now on PulseChain. And that means people have to decide, do they want to sell their PulseChain lower than it's been normally, and probably much lower than it's possibly worth in the future, and eat a bunch of slippage, especially the whales, or do they want to try to buy this later on, thinking that ProveX will dump 90% like these other ones have? And I think if you get a much higher percentage of the community thinking, oh, I'll buy it on the dip, or, oh, this isn't going to impress me, or I'm tired, boss meme, well, that creates a pretty interesting setup for really good price action. And what does really good price action mean? Well, maybe you get a 10x or 100x, something in between what you've seen on PulseChain. You've seen maybe 10x at the beginning and a 10x in the middle. Hex, you got a 10,000x from the bottom, which was a 90% dump, but maybe you got a 200x from the starting price of a third of a penny. Does that math add up? Less than that, 150x. So that'd be interesting to see something like in between. And we've seen like what I would consider to be like a trusted community member, Buck, who created the fiat ecosystem and even sponsored the Hex conference last year for one of the days, and who's like forked Aave and Convex and like these different super complicated protocols. And even when like the OG protocols got hacked on Ethereum, like they didn't get hacked because Buck's developers like did a good job. He's running a sacrifice pool, ProveX pool.com, and about half of what's been sacrificed out of the 5 million has gone through his pool because of how the reward structure is set up, which is pretty close, very similar to how it was for PulseChain and PulseX, where it's the number of points. Like basically, each dollar sacrificed that like is an improved token gets a certain number of points during a certain period of time. And it's the analogy of like the points are lining up in a stadium, like the number one point, like the most valuable point, the point that came from the sacrificer who sacrificed the most, their top point gets a 3x multiplier this time instead of 2.5x previously. And then every point after that gets like, down the line number of x's of a volume bonus until you get to the smallest sacrifice, and that's a 1x. And all of this is based on 10,000 points per dollar. And so basically what that means is, if $2.5 million has come in through a single number one sacrifice pool, that means that the entire pool is dragged down to a 2.5x because their points span from the 3x to the 2x essentially. And so it'll be really interesting, and I'm going to be doing a live stream to capture the action of what happens coming up this Tuesday afternoon. I'll be streaming for about 4 or 5 hours, having a bunch of special guests on to comment about the end of this volume bonus period of the PulseX sacrifice. And so that'll be really exciting, because if a whale jumps in and they want to get the best rate, they have to sacrifice more than the pool, which is already at 2.5 million, give or take. And I think there's a lot of incentive for people to FOMO in at the end, which is, again, why I think that PulseChain and PulseX, like, they could go down in value like over the next week as people make their final decision about ProveX. But I don't expect them to stay low forever, because there's people waiting on the sidelines who are like, yeah, give me those coins cheap. And low liquidity means things can really perform. But I don't expect like an OA pump or like other pumpage in between now and the end of that sacrifice volume bonus period, because people are expecting a dip. I would say whales are, and because people who are already in don't want other people to be able to exit their pulse positions like at a higher rate and get more of the sacrifice for themselves. Like if PulseChain did a 5x overnight, that'd be a lot more competition for the ProveX sacrifice. Look, I don't make the rules. I just call it like it is. And so I think that'll be interesting. And I'm certainly not bearish on PulseChain or PulseX like in the medium and long term. So that's kind of interesting to me. And yeah, right now I see people are like really mad about like, the performance of the RH tickers, and like the fact that the RH tickers are not being accepted for this sacrifice. But I think it's really genius game theory if you want to have a low valuation for this so that you can brag about how well it did. And so I've heard Buck and others like compare like what should the value of ProveX be like in terms of market cap? Should it be more than Inc and less than PulseX, or as much as PulseX? And that's an interesting question. And so far, there's only been 5 million sacrificed. Maybe that'll get to 10 or 20 million. But Inc has been consistently valued at 50 million or more. And so, yeah, so I think that there's a lot of people who aren't incentivized to talk about ProveX yet because they kind of want to hoard the opportunity for themselves. And it's pretty risky. Like it's not something most people would be attracted to because it's a sacrifice. You don't have any guarantees. Past sacrifices haven't worked out well, like for people who didn't like only getting a 2.5x or 10x, so on and so forth. So also you had like a broader dip in Bitcoin and Ethereum around the time that this sacrifice happened. Another key date that we'll be keeping an eye on is for ProveX, just so happens to coincide with the same dates that I've always run the Hex conference for the past 6 years. And so, it might not be a coincidence that the ProveX like total sacrifice period beyond the volume multiplier that ends coming up on Tuesday, that longer period ends on January 9th, UTC, which is the last day of the 6th annual Hex conference. And, so if Richard was designing a deadline, I don't think it'd be an accident that he chose like to end this thing at the exact second that the 4th day of the Hex conference has gone live every year. which is like 6 p.m. Central Time, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. on the West Coast. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. And while I'm on it, other updates about the 6th annual Hex conference. It will be 4 days from January 6th to 9th online, hexconference.com, streamed on my YouTube and Twitter, as well as the @PulseChain and @Hex Conference Twitter accounts. And I'll be opening up a call for speakers in the next week. And we'll be inviting all the speakers we've had in the past, which has gotten up now to over 160 people. Now, I'd say about half of those people have dropped off, over the past 6 years, but there's still a really strong crowd of people out there that especially like to show up for these twice yearly events that I put on. And as like an example of kind of surprising good faith, your friend Sami has privately messaged me that he would like to speak at the Hex conference. And I said that would be great. And I would love to have him on. And people have seen on Twitter that him and I have like criticized each other and had beef. And so I think that's a really good example of people working together, because at the end of the day, kind of how I started the stream off, like, we're all in crypto for important reasons, whether that's like economic survival and gain, or more philosophical, or lots of other kind of aligned values. So even when we create these like subcults and do our storming and norming psychology, where we try to like set the culture, and have emotional reactions based on charts or based on like principles or whatever it is, still at the end of the day, like there's still reasons to work together. And so I'm pretty excited about that. And I'd commend Sami for reaching out to me. So I don't know when ProveX is going to launch, but I just think the main point in my thesis is people aren't expecting a Richard Hart win in general. And Richard's the winner. And so the PulseChain and PulseX sacrifices were oversubscribed with inflated valuations that were even possible to support for a period of time. The examples of like 2 different 10x's that occurred, or 2.5x's, either way. So these are things that kind of worked against us, but at the same time, yeah. So I think like for all those reasons, people will be surprised at how well ProveX can perform, because it might hit that sweet spot between something that does have utility and is needed, with like a 1% buy and sell fee that goes to buy and burn the token. But hey, maybe that volume is only going to be $100,000 ever, worst case scenario, or maybe it'll end up being billions. But even on the low end, even if there's only $7,000 of the token burned ever, or no, it'd be even less than that. It'd be like $1,400. That would be like the meme side of things, where even a Richard Hart meme that has good price performance could continue to have good price performance, because people would forget about the losses, or PulseChain would be able to recover alongside of this doing well. And one of the pieces of game theory that I would find particularly interesting for people to analyze is whether ProveX and PulseChain will have like thick liquidity at the beginning or not. Because I could almost see a better benefit of having like low liquidity at the beginning in order to let ProveX run without giving too much of a free ride or an opportunity for people who maybe missed the sacrifice and then woke up to the fact that this is an opportunity. And I think that there's a lot of things that are paired with PulseChain, alternative tokens that would drag down ProveX if ProveX is paired with Pulse and Pulse is paired with 1,000 different, like, you know, subcult tokens like PTGC, PDI, wrapped Bitcoin, so on and so forth, right? So, Atropa, all these things that, like in the PDI example, like, you know, maybe remove $30 million from the chain just from one person. You know, and then you had, you know, you had other events, whether they were sacrifices around the time of Hex or different events, you know, where a few number of people walked away with big wins on PulseChain, but the average PulseChain holder didn't benefit. And so I think there could be a benefit to the PulseChain ticker, to PLS in the short term, but I would not expect that to be more likely or the best design compared to making everybody with PulseChain FOMO in to ProveX once they see it up 20x. And certainly low liquidity would do that. Or getting, you know, getting really extreme, you compare ProveX with stablecoins. That'd be interesting too. So that's what would give ProveX the strongest ability to go up would be, you know, if just $1 million out of 600 million, you know, that's sitting there from the PulseChain sacrifice, if that started buying ProveX, everybody would freak out and want to buy alongside that. You know, some people, they would want to see a dip, and when they don't see a dip, then they would buy higher. But they would be buying with their PulseChain and their Hex and their PulseX. And hey, like, I've been wrong before. I'm happy, you know, I'm happy for people to, you know, bring this up and say like, hey, you were wrong if this isn't how it goes. But I'm just being very frank and honest with people about, hey, like, here's how Richard's redemption arc could go. You know, having a 100x runner updates the marketing narrative, even if only a few people who sacrificed got it. And it didn't happen all at once, you know, it'd go up, you know, 5x and then go down. Now you're down 50% from the number you had in your head. So now you kind of have to shake people out on the way up. It's never a straight line. But what I'm saying is, even if there was no utility, there would still be great value in like having really strong performance with something that isn't held down by like an inflated hex price, by a sacrifice price, you know, that was long ago, and that sort of thing. And so would it break my heart a little bit if ProveX was more valuable than PulseX? Because I think PulseX is like the coolest utility in crypto. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it probably would break my heart a little bit, but I've sacrificed according to, you know, what I think is going to be the best play. And I see very few people, like, relatively speaking, interested in ProveX. have an example tweet like from David Feeder, who like I respect and is strongly respected in the community, even though I think he canceled me for like having a sponsor that he didn't like at the X conference one time, or one of my I'm not sure what it was, but anyway, I don't bring this up like to call David out in any way. It's actually the opposite, that I respect David so much and he's so well respected in the community that I think this speaks like for a lot of people when he says today on Twitter that he's bearish on ProveX because he remembers the PulseX launch. You know, I've reiterated that the PulseX launch, yeah, that didn't get a 2.5x or a 10x like off the bat. Got a 1.5x. Like, so maybe he's not focusing on that part. I know I didn't sell. I bought more when it launched. And then I had to buy all the way down. But then I did well because I lowered my cost basis and then it went up a lot. David says, if 2 years and $1 billion can't produce a bug-free fork of Uniswap, how can a few $1 million produce a brand new product? And I mean, this is like a very sentiment-based thing, in my opinion. But it's also factual. But yeah, I mean, it's pretty harsh, and it's I think it's capturing the attitude right now, but ignoring the opportunity. Because if everybody thinks like this, that creates opportunity. If you still believe in Richard, believe he's a winner, believe that, you know, utility and price performance are not synonymous. Like, but so he's got this meme of like RH, you know, being whatever, you know, like shooting this person and then blaming them. Like, it's, I don't know, it's kind of a hard meme to explain. 2 years and $1 billion. Why didn't the users tell me about the PulseX bug? And then lots of people, you know, there's 300 people that like this. Like, that's a lot. Guru Finance and many other people were chiming in, like, thanks for speaking out. Like, you know, that's what I think too, blah, blah, blah. And yeah, so like, I'm happy to see that. And if, you know, if people don't think that ProveX is going to do well, like, you know, don't sacrifice. Like, you don't have to be in the same boat as me. But I'm lucky that, you know, I did well on another crypto that I like haven't talked about much on here and like don't really recommend anymore, but like had a really good run this cycle, with like, you know, a small part of my portfolio that turned into a big part. And so that's what made me comfortable, like sacrificing a similar amount that I did for PulseChain and PulseX into ProveX. So, you know, I'm like lucky to be in that position, and you know, but even people that I would speak to in my personal life, like, you know, I might still suggest like, hey, what do you think? You know, are you thinking to put, you know, maybe half of this value or a third of this value that you have in PulseChain or PulseX into ProveX? Because it seems to be a contrarian play. So I'm happy, yeah, for people to like, wait and see it later on, like, you know, buy later. Maybe you'll get to buy the dip and help save me when I'm wrong. But yeah, I just think like the game theory is interesting. We see like another difference between the sacrifice in the past and sacrifice now is there used to be a 0.75x multiplier once you went beyond the volume bonus period. Let me bring this up. And now it's a 1.75x. We don't know if the OA will like sacrifice late or not. But what we do know, is we're going to be covering it on this channel. When this rate period ends, sorry, that's right here. Make sure you can see it. Nope, can't see my screen. There we go. So this whole thing started on 11/11. Now we're on day 16. The up to 3x bonus multiplier continues until December 2nd UTC, which is the afternoon and evening of December 1st. I liked the idea of sacrificing in Buck's pool, although I might sacrifice a little bit outside of there, and I accept the risk. But I really didn't like whales getting a huge multiplier more than I did last time. And I think Buck has like pretty good reasons for explaining why maybe RH wouldn't screw these people over. And I don't think Buck would screw people over, but you have to make your own decision about that. But there's a Telegram that is probably linked to from ProveXpool.com, and there's a lot of scammers on Telegram, so you have to make sure you don't send to the wrong address, because that's the type of sacrifice where you don't get any points. But so I don't have any super strong theories as to why like this like a bonus period happens here with like a flat 75% bonus. And in the past it was 1.75x. But it just shows you that RH is updating things a little bit here and there. We have this 5% increase compounding per day. The number of days is running a little bit longer, definitely than PulseChain, and also longer than PulseX, I believe, or yeah. But this whole sacrifice is going like, what is it, 61 days or something? And so, but there's a lot of time in here where it doesn't make sense to join really, because your rate is getting worse by 5% compounded per day after this coming Tuesday. And, then it goes all the way up to like $10 per 10,000 points instead of $1 per 10,000 points. So might we see a large OA sacrifice at the end here, so that a benevolent whale holds 90% of the supply, and that can inflate the market cap? That like makes it harder to get listed on centralized exchanges, but keeps it more DeFi, not your keys, not your coins. So there's trade-offs there. Richard said, with this project or this product, like he's trying something different. In the sense that before he like forked things that already existed, put them together in a different way. This time he's saying that he's creating something that's never existed before, that would be the first of its kind, revolutionary. So I wonder if he would also pivot on the whole, like not 10xing like the amount raised. Although I'm still kind of on the fence on it, because it's not just the reason that like the market cap looks bigger, or that like centralized exchanges, are like looking at whale accounts and being like, oh, we don't like that. But also, I mean, it does get more headlines to say like, oh, this raised like $100 million or whatever, versus just raising 10 or 20. So there's different marketing involved. Like at the end of the day, for someone like me, I don't think it matters whether like the OA sacrifices or not. Like it's still the same game. Since the OA has never sold, doesn't mean they can't. But like in terms of, in terms of wanting to see this be another success story like Hex was, and to do something revolutionary like Hex did, and to create more opportunity to onboard people into PulseChain and PulseX so that they can do something more valuable than they've been doing. That'd be really cool. And so, yeah, those are my thoughts about ProveX. I'm excited about it. I sacrificed for it. I don't see a lot of other people as excited as I am. A lot of people who would be as excited or maybe are as excited as I am, I don't think would tell you about it because they don't want the competition, because having too many people excited about something before it came out last time created all the sell pressure that we saw and like the oversubscription and the inflated value in PulseChain and PulseX. Except, I mean, the SEC really is the one that like created our downfall. Like, I think even Hex never getting listed on centralized exchanges, it performed super well. I think PulseChain and PulseX would have performed much better than they have, even being oversubscribed, if that hadn't been an issue. And so that's part of the reason why I think like this is such a good opportunity. It's because people are tired, boss, and so there's not as much ability for this to be oversubscribed. Could Rackham come in and screw stuff up? Yeah, but he's not getting as much of a free ride as he got before. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him sacrifice and beat the pool, or not sacrifice and not beat the pool. I would prefer him not to sacrifice, and but at the end of the day, I don't think it like erases the opportunity, even though he's been taking so much opportunity for himself and like not contributing much and like doing duplicitous behavior of like hyping things only when he's selling them and stuff like that. But he's already got me blocked, so whatever. Some people suck up to him, and at the end of the day, like people, at the end of the day, you want like the bad whales to walk away. But you don't want to focus on them so much that like you forget that you can always attract new good whales. And yeah, so I think Richard is really unpopular right now, and I think he's a genius, and he was playing the game not just on max hard but on impossible when it comes to like raising 1.6 billion, having the SEC attack over a case that they ultimately lost. Richard is a winner. He has not given up. He's not going away from Twitter. Sentiment is all wrong right now. And yeah, so there's a bright future ahead. Maybe don't panic dump PulseChain and PulseX if you see them go down a week from now. You might expect that. You might buy some, or at least participate in ProveX, but also don't be surprised to see them go up even more quickly than they went down, because of the low liquidity situation, because of the unique time period that we're in right now, where you have people waiting to buy a bigger dip, so they're not buying this dip yet, and you have people probably ultimately going to decide to sacrifice. and they're going to eat a lot of slippage and push the price down in order to get out of their core positions to do that. Anything more that Richard says in favor of ProveX is likely to cause PulseChain and PulseX to go down more. But, you know, PulseChain and PulseX are still really great technologies that are undervalued at this level. If you're buying them at this level, you know, you're getting a better deal than almost all who came before you. Greed combines with fear, and they aren't just like different points of time and different like years. Like people can get so greedy about buying a dip that they miss it. And they can also be so fearful that they don't buy a dip. So that's kind of some interesting bottom psychology that people have to consider. DCAing is like the best strategy. You know, but like, I'm just telling you how it is because everybody's going to make their own decisions. I'm not going to make decisions for you. And that's where we're at right now, where the performance in the next week, I do not expect to be the same kind of indicator as like the performance that we'll see a month from now, or certainly a year from now. So yeah, I hope everybody's having a great Thanksgiving. I am going to get back to these family activities and celebrations, but yeah, I just wanted to you know, let everybody know I'm thankful for you tuning in. I'm thankful for crypto. I wish you the very best, and I'll be back very soon on Tuesday to do this 5-hour live stream that's covering the ProveX sacrifice critical period. Should be some exciting watching to do. And yeah, hit the like and subscribe button and share this out. Do I have an outro? Let's switch it up here a little bit. Nope, not that one. Maybe this is it. Until next time, stake wisely, my friends, and peace out. Also, sacrifice wisely, and happy Thanksgiving.
It's from Maddie Allen of Hex Therapy Live. I like Maddie. Maddie tries to make the world a healthier place. He's a mental health professional. He's done research.
Makes videos on sudden wealth syndrome.
There's nothing that a human being could do better than try and heal his fellow man.
Maddie Allen's got that covered. He does emotional, feel-good, mind management, emotion stuff, like, as his gig, because he's a therapist. That's what he does for a living. Like, he helps heal people.